I was challenged by you, well, not you specifically, but by Sword Tomato, to create a 3x3 redstone door entirely of my own creation. I started out with a double piston on the center on the bottom. This didn't really work for me though. I was trying to use observers to be able to tell when the pistons were extended and to tell it to double extend, and that didn't work for me at all. So then I moved on to just the sides and the top portion. I tried with the sides to be able to have a vertical column of redstone, and that didn't work either. I couldn't figure out how to use observers to tell everything to turn on, and I also couldn't figure out how to just make torches turn everything on. So I ended up just using a spiral of redstone. I continued on to the other side for the 3x3, and then I moved to the top and got it working so that I had all the sides closing in except for the middle dot. The problem was I needed something that would move the block 2 up in the center without being separate from the rest. I tried a bunch of different things on this. I once again tried to do a timing thing with the middle block to make it move twice. It didn't work out. I tried to figure out how to move one block into the spot, then move the other piston, and then move the block back. It didn't work. Pretty much nothing I tried worked on this except for the final thing. I played with an observer again to try to get it to sense when a block had moved and the state had changed, but I couldn't quite get it to work, so I abandoned that soon after. There's a couple points where I thought I had an epiphany and I could use a comparator to tell when the block had moved, and then that would be able to tell the piston to activate and not activate when I wanted it to, but that was getting way too high level for what I understood. I ended up having to do some research on how comparators worked and also exactly what power levels were and what redstone power levels were. I eventually got it to where I could actually compare something and change the output, but it never amounted to anything for this build. So I abandoned the double extension for a little bit and then just tried to work to make everything else work. Eventually I landed on a side push double extension where I could time each block more easily and more easily reach them with redstone. What I ended up with was a double extender that set timing for the first piston and then set a longer timing for the second piston, and then it would double extend and return very easily. I got super excited when that happened. After that, I ran into the problem that if it was just a switch that only controlled open and shut, the problem was that I would always have to press that switch to control open and shut. Now the way I could effectively remove this was to call it a flip-flop in actual computers, which just flops when it receives a pulse between a strong on and a strong off. So I tried to do this with pistons where it pushed a block and the block would allow a signal to come from a repeater into it and then out of it. And this worked kind of. It got really complicated at times. I ended up with a hard lock, hard signal because I accidentally wound the redstone into itself. But after playing with it for a while, I realized that it could work, and I kind of got it to work, but I couldn't reset it once I reached a point. So I played with sticky pistons versus normal pistons, and I came to the conclusion that I would have to have normal pistons with buttons and then a sticky piston set with buttons. You had to do a special combination in order to make it work and open it from both sides. It was a really riggedy flip-flop. I celebrated a bit early when I realized that I could get it to work, but didn't care about the pattern, and moved on to an actual 3x3 made by a professional redstone builder. This particular 3x3 door is from Mysticat. It really helped me to understand how observers work to build this a couple of different times. But we're going to start with a double extending piston in order to get that center block out of this square. So that's just 2 sticky pistons on top of each other. Now in order to control that, we want to be able to have a repeater on a 4-tick delay connected to a observer, and this observer is just going to detect when this block state changes. So whenever this redstone is energized, it will energize that bottom piston. Now in addition to that, we also want to be able to control the top piston independently from the bottom piston. So in order to do that, we're going to connect to this redstone repeater here and then to an observer here, which is monitoring redstone that goes below it. And now instead of this repeater, we'll have a switch here. That repeater's for later on, part of that flip-flop. We'll have a lever here, and this lever, when activated, will activate the same exact way. And all it's doing is sending a signal here. This observer sees it and tells the top piston to energize. And that's going to push the first block up, and then when it does that, it sends the signal, and it's going to energize this repeater here, and it's going to tell this observer that it's on, and that observer is going to energize this block, and that's going to turn on this piston here. That piston is pushing a block sideways on top of the double extension piston. And then when that happens, it'll push the block on top of this, and then we can energize it once more from the bottom, and that'll complete the 2 block rise. Now for the rest of the circuit, past this switch and this repeater, we have observers. So these 2 observers are observing the state of this 2-tick delay repeater, and that's just so that it matches this 2-tick delay repeater, because both of those side walls are going to be pushed in at the same rate. On this side, it works by having 2 observers on top of each other, updating each other, and then finally through this block to this top redstone to tell all of them to energize. On this opposite side, this observer is looking at this redstone, updating the redstone on top of it. This observer does the same thing and sends a signal all the way up to the top block. And that gets all of your sidewalls and the top all energized at the same time. Now, if you want to control this without a switch, meaning that you'll be able to walk through it and press a button from the opposite side in order to energize it, you're going to want to use a repeater here instead of the switch. This repeater is going to go to a flip-flop, which all it does very simply is take a pulsing signal from a button, for instance, and turn that into a constant signal. And so every time we pulse this, it turns off this redstone and it turns off this repeater and changes the state of the locking one. So right now this locking one is de-energized, so this redstone torch is energized and it keeps that signal held down. And now you can see the difference between a professional redstone door and my garbage dump. Let me know what your favorite was in the comments.